Our next presenter is Danica Nolton. She is from Grinnell and attends Grinnell High School. She is the daughter of Vicki and Brian Nolton, and her project is called Into Focus.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I could not agree more. This is a photo that holds great storytelling power, and I will share why. When I was 14, my world was turned upside down when I was diagnosed with cancer. I pushed through chemotherapy and radiation treatment, which is where this photo gains meaning. This is a radiation mask. It was used to secure me to the table while I received treatment. This is a photo that tells my story, and it's a critical tool for where words do not suffice. While I was in treatment, I found it very difficult to express what I was feeling or going through, even to those closest to me. It took me nearly 2.5 years to find a way to express this and open up. This realization came when a friend and I worked to tell my story through her poetry. After seeing how she used her favorite medium in this way, I realized that I could combine my longtime love of photography with the power of storytelling. Just like Hoover wanted to use his past experiences to help others, I wanted to do the same. Hoover was orphaned at a young age and knew well the pain that came with this experience. This understanding later shaped his relief actions during the World War I era. He understood the feeling of helplessness and being abandoned, so he worked diligently to prevent this from others. From the same desire to prevent the suffering I had experienced, my photography workshop came to fruition. When I started out to create my program, I set 3 main goals. 1, to create a foundational understanding of basic photography principles. 2, to introduce middle schoolers to photography as a storytelling technique. And 3, to create a positive, creative, and productive learning environment to encourage experimentation and expression. While developing my program goals, I kept Hoover's philosophy on American individualism close at mind. It says, quote, that each individual shall be given the chance and stimulation for development of the best with which he has been endowed in heart and mind. Like many others, my middle school years were not the most pleasant of times for the development of my best self. I faced a lot of challenges even before my diagnosis, and often had trouble expressing these in a healthy way. For these reasons, I decided to create a photography workshop for middle school age students to help them in their development of their best self. To start developing my program, I began by researching possible venues. I selected the local Drake Community Library in my town because it serves as a local hub for many children and community educational programs for people of all socioeconomic backgrounds. During the planning meetings with the Library Youth Services Director, I selected 3 Thursdays in July to hold my workshops. I then contacted another local student photographer who agreed to assist me in my workshops. After lots and lots of research of professional photography workshops, sources, and tutorials, I decided to cover portraits, landscapes, and photo manipulation. Because I wanted my project to be open to children of all socioeconomic groups, I designed curriculum that needed the use of only a phone camera rather than a more expensive camera that not many would have access to. Then I created a PowerPoint and entrance survey questions to gather data and get the students thinking about what stories they wanted to tell. Once I had the basic outline of my program, I created a list of class supplies and a budget. I knew that I wanted students to be able to bring their photography to life through printing, but unfortunately the library did not have a photo printer. In order to make printing possible, I researched different funding options and submitted a community enhancement grant proposal to Grinnell College. I received approval and ordered my supplies. After months and months of planning, I was finally ready to put the final touches on my presentation and gear up for my workshop days. I felt prepared, but I was really nervous because I didn't know how many people would show up or how they would react to what I had planned. I began each day with entrance questions to get the students to ponder what they wanted to capture. Questions included, how can we illustrate a story or idea through still life? What stories do you want to capture? And what emotions or ideas do you want to portray? I then used a PowerPoint presentation to show examples of different photography techniques and principles. These included lighting, composition, focus, perspective, and leading lines. After learning these things, students were given creative time to apply what we had discussed. During this time, my assistant and I went around and encouraged students to try different angles and techniques to tell their stories and express their ideas. Each session concluded with reflection questions on what the students had learned. After the completion of all the workshops, I coordinated with the Library Youth Services Director to create a photo display. The display featured survey questions as well as each and every participant's work. It was placed in a well-trafficked area of the library for 2 weeks, as well as on various social media platforms. This was a great way to showcase what the students had learned to community members and students alike. After my workshop series was completed, I compiled the data from the survey questions to assess the outcomes of my project, which I will share with you now. As I mentioned earlier, my first goal was to introduce students to the basic photography principles. Based on survey responses and participation in the workshops, 100% of students learned new photography concepts. This was evident in my workshops when I would suggest using the rule of thirds in a photo, and they would respond with, "Oh yeah," or I could position my subject on the left to give them a place to go. Their insight was truly amazing. It showed that they really absorbed all of the concepts that we were trying to teach. This was a significant accomplishment because it increased their confidence in the language of photography so that they can more naturally use it as an outlet for expression in the future. Students also achieved my second goal, which was to grasp photography as a storytelling technique. After the first workshop, I realized how abstract this concept was, especially for people of this age group. Even though it was completely unfamiliar to all of them, they really embraced the opportunity to experiment with how the photo made them feel and telling a story. They would ask the subject to face full light for a happier emotion and turn half in shadow for a more serious emotion. I am confident that they will continue to use this to communicate themselves in a healthy way. This will be especially helpful when it is difficult to share sensitive issues, topics, or their story. I hope that it will empower them to stay connected in a time when kids are increasingly isolated because of technology. These workshops also accomplished my last goal, which was to create a positive and creative learning environment. Initially, I was very concerned about how the students would react. However, I was very proud of how the students encouraged each other, honestly expressed themselves through their creations, and pushed past their comfort zones. It was heartwarming to hear them say to one another, "I really like what you did there," or "That is so cool. I like how that highlights the subject in your photo." I am happy to report that this workshop reached more students than some expected. During the planning phases of my program, the Library Youth Services Director noted that middle school programs usually had low participation, and averaging 3 to 5 students would be good for us. Despite the challenges of reaching this age group, I averaged 6 participants per workshop and reached a total of 17 over the 3. Each week, the number of participants increased, and this group composition really allowed for genuine one-on-one time to answer questions and tailor the workshop to what each individual needed. This project also positively impacted the library. Both staff and community members commented on how much they loved seeing what the students had created in the workshops through the photo display. It also increased the awareness of the library as a source for programming beyond literature. And I hope this will help them reach more middle school age students in the future. The library will also benefit from the new photo printer that can be used for future photography workshops as well as other creative programming. Since several library staff, participants, and community members were so excited about the workshops and inquired if I could offer more in the future, I plan to do so within the next few months. I am also connecting with the college students that are in charge of the middle school art club, and we are developing ideas on how to integrate photographic storytelling into their art club workshops. This will allow the spirit of my project to live on well beyond my time in Grinnell. Just as Hoover's work uplifted people's spirits, my project goes way beyond the numerical data to the emotional and spiritual impact that it left on every single participant. They gained a coping mechanism that will allow them to de-stress and appreciate the small things in a new light. They also learned how to use photography for when words are not there, so that they do not have to remain stuck in voicelessness and isolation. As renowned photographer Ansel Adams said, "When words become unclear, I shall focus with photographs. When images become inadequate, I shall be content with silence." Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned how hard it is to get middle school students to participate. As you went through this process, do you have ideas for how to increase participation, reaching out to middle school kids to get them involved in this?
So I think one of the biggest things that I learned is how well middle school students respond to positive feedback. And I think one of the reasons that they don't come is because they feel uncomfortable expressing themselves and pushing outside of their comfort zones. And so I think that was one of the really important things that we tried to do, was to make it such a positive environment that they wanted to come back. And I think that just having that positive experience once with the library, they will be able to say, oh yeah, I had that really fun time, and so maybe if I go to another workshop, it'll be like that again. So I think just being able to have them know that the library and all of their programming is like a positive place that's uplifting and safe for them to experiment is just a really, really powerful tool to be able to bring more middle schoolers into the library.
I'm wondering, I've asked you to use your creativity. You're obviously a creative young lady as well as a courageous one. If Herbert Hoover, if you could think about Herbert Hoover as a 10, 11-year-old boy, what kind of a photograph do you think he would take?
That is a great question. I think there's such a wide range of things to photograph, especially with emotions. And I feel like if he was taking a picture, he would create a very powerful, like emotional picture that also uplifts people, because that was something that he focused on so much, was just being there for people and using what he had experienced. So maybe something similar to like one of my pictures, like this one, just using what he had experienced to elicit a feeling, but also to encourage people and just educate them.
Thanks.
Were the participants the same for each class, or did they grow over time? And did the students who came to the first class, most of them continue through?
So the question was if most of the participants were the same for each class. So the first workshop, we had a lower number of students. We had about 3, and then the second one we had 6, and then the last one we had 10. So most of the ones that were at the first one did come to all 3, and then there was a couple at the second one that didn't, but they were some of the younger students, and I could tell that they weren't really with any of their friends. And they kind of felt out of place with some of the older ones. But the rest of them did come to, if they came to one, they did come to like the next ones. And each week the number did grow. So I think it's just a testament to the positive environment that we did create.
With that environment, did you struggle with the middle school kids interacting well to begin with in the workshops with their technology? Were they open and sharing, or did it take a little bit for them to get outside their comfort zone in the workshop?
Yes. So the first workshop, it did kind of take us like stepping up and being like, you know, this is a great idea to do this, or we're going to set up this if you want to do this, because it is completely new, especially on that first day. So it did take a little while for them to get out there and start trying things. But once one person started, everybody was like, oh, if they're doing that, I can do that too. So it just took the first person making the first step, and then everybody was gung-ho, especially on the last workshop, because they were kind of getting more comfortable with me and my assistant, as well as the other students. And they let themselves go creatively, and it was beautiful to see, because they were trying different things, they were getting out there, and it was probably one of the most rewarding things, just seeing them being like, that is so cool. Like, they were honestly so impressed with each other, and I was so incredibly proud of them because they were being so creative and open.
Thank you.
Thank you.